Alright, the sun is shining through my window. I've lost my water bottle, and it's a brand new day, and I wanna play some CaveBlazers now. It's time to play CaveBlazers with the slasher perk. So the way the slasher class or perk or whatever you want to call it works is that we have a projectile that shoots out from our sword, and that's it. Now you might be thinking, wow, that sounds really underwhelming. And, I'm sure a lot of people agree with you, especially since there's actually a blessing you can... Hey, this golden skull is actually the game's icon on Steam. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of people agree with you that this class is underwhelming, especially since there's a blessing you can get that lets you do the same thing as long as you're above 80% health. But the perk we have lets you do it all the time, and the blessing only lets you do it sometimes, so the perk is still better. Anyway, the slasher class may be my favorite. I should really decide whether I'm calling these perks or classes. I'm going to call them perks because that's what the game calls them from now on. The slasher perk, which is what lets us shoot this projectile out of our sword, is my favorite, even though it may seem underwhelming. And, to a lot of people it's probably not all that impressive, but to me, it's really good because it basically guarantees your victory when you're fighting melee enemies on the same plane as them. Sure, if the melee enemies are above you or below you, it's not so easy, but if you're fighting melee enemies on the same plane as you, your victory is pretty much guaranteed, as long as you have the slasher perk. And the faster the sword you have with the slasher perk, the better, because a faster sword means you're shooting more projectiles, obviously. So, yeah, that's what I like about it. It may seem a little underwhelming, but it's a quality of life thing, I guess, which is weird considering I've talked down about other quality of life perks and blessings, but, maybe I'm not so different. Sometimes people realize they were wrong about things, or that maybe they weren't as different as they thought. The poison ring is good. Being able to poison or burn bosses is a huge, huge help. Looking around on the internet and at a lot of drama and stuff surrounding people that talk on the internet, it's kind of weird how much people expect your opinion to stay the same over time on the internet, especially. Like, people will dig up stuff you said years and years ago and act like that's indicative of your character in person today, even though people change their mind all the time. And there's this idea that when you change your beliefs, you should make it known, and that just seems weird to me. Do you know how many beliefs people have? Do you know how many beliefs I have? I can't possibly alert everyone every single time one of those changes. Like, sure, when it's relevant, of course it's gonna come up. But there are 1,700 or something like that videos on this channel. Right, so some of the stuff I said, I probably don't believe anymore. Like, I'm nearly certain of it. And I still leave those those videos on the channel, because even though I don't agree with them anymore, that doesn't mean those opinions don't have value just because I don't personally have them anymore. And, oh, the crystal sword. One of my favorite swords because it's the fastest. Which means we'll shoot more projectiles really, really quickly. And that's probably, my favorite sword to have in combination with this perk, the slasher perk, because, I like attacking fast, and attacking fast now shoots out shockwaves from the tip of my sword, so I can just slaughter everything. And it's really good. Especially when the projectiles knock the enemies back and stun them slightly, which they do. So it's just a good time all around. Quick fun fact, the original recording I had of me doing a run with the slasher perk, it kind of got deleted. So this is a second attempt at me recording with the slasher perk, and honestly I think it's going better than the first attempt. And I thought the first attempt was going pretty well. I beat Chrono Boyd with almost no help. Like, I just had pretty basic gear, and that felt good. Alright, hey Iron Face. So Iron Face has orbs that shoot projectiles, and sometimes sometimes a couple of his orbs will turn red and shoot big ol' lasers that you can't really avoid unless you move super fast. Bouncing off his orbs helps with avoiding the lasers, but you need to do a downward stab to do that. It kind of requires a lot of skill, I'm not gonna lie, but we're pretty beefy right now, so he's gonna die real fast. And then after he dies, he has a second phase, which is arguably easier than the first one. Now we just have to fight all the orbs individually. And this is one of 2 bosses where you have to fight a bunch of individual orbs, the second one being Death Rig. The big red lasers are really the worst part, I think. They're really hard to avoid. You may have noticed that when our Golden Skull buddy charges up, we can send him around to fire projectiles with a lot of knockback at our enemies. And that's pretty fun, because it also knocks back any bosses really far, assuming the bosses can be knocked back. Iron Face cannot be knocked back, he's always right there in the middle of the screen. You know, I'm actually a little curious how I've managed to misplace my water bottle, because the room was just cleaned yesterday by my sister Dizzy, and the cat knocked my headphone cord out. And I was trying to eat it. As I was saying, the room was just cleaned yesterday, and I mean cleaned. Like, everything was taken out. The floor was entirely swept, mopped down, broomed over. Just the whole floor was empty. The whole room was empty. We threw out our dresser, threw out almost everything we didn't need anymore, including our bed frame, because, like, do you really need a bed frame? I think you just really kind of need the mattress, right? So it's actually pretty barren in here, except for the mattress I'm currently sitting on, the tub of plush toys on one of the walls, and our collectibles. There's really not a lot else in here. So I don't see where anything could have gone where I wouldn't see it. And I'm pretty sure I'm not sitting on it. I'm not going to completely rule out that I might be sitting on the water bottle, but I'm pretty sure I'm not sitting on it. I think I've already mentioned that I really like the soundtrack in this game. Some of the tracks remind me of Tim Fallen, especially Tim Fallen's work on the Future Tactics soundtrack, that in particular. The cats are being so excessively noisy and touchy today. It's really bothersome. I'm just trying to talk over CaveBlazers. So, I make it further than ever with this perk right here. Just a little spoiler. And normally the idea is just to talk over the entire run, but the cats are being really irritating, and they're not adjusting well to the new layout of the room. And on top of that, I explore everything really thoroughly in all the dungeons in this run. So what I'm going to do is skip to when we get to the Forsaken Jungle, where things get really difficult and interesting, and you can see me fight the 3rd tier of boss battle, where the health gets ridiculous. So here's me finishing off Death Rig, who I think you've seen in the first video, but this is Death Rig as the second boss, which means he has more health than he would if he were the first boss. That's just how it works. Even if the bosses are the same, the later you fight them, the more health they have, because that's how game progression works. That's how difficulty goes. Right. So now onto the Forsaken Jungle, which has absolutely gorgeous music, and I recommend anyone look up the music for Forsaken Jungle if they get the chance. There are these totems that pop out of the ground and fire really rapid shots, and I find that melee attacks are the best at dispensing them, because melee attacks stun them and prevent them from firing at you, which is ideal, of course. There are also bats that shoot fire at you, there are slimes that leap in the air and shoot poison balls at you, and there are just slimes that bump into you and catch you on fire just by bumping into you. So this is status effect hell, and it can be hard to adjust to if you're not used to being pummeled with status effects, which, why would you be, because that doesn't really come up until now. But it's time to get used to it, because getting hit by the poison slimes or the fire slimes or the guy that shoots fire is going to poison or burn you. And a lot of people complain that when you get to this part of the game, there's suddenly a lot of enemies that inflict status effects. And I mean, I'm not sure what they were expecting, because the status effects exist, and it's only natural to introduce enemies at some point during the gameplay that cause status effect problems, right? I think that's pretty normal for an RPG. And I would understand the frustration if the status effects were unavoidable, but like with that slime, you saw I could just hide behind a wall to avoid getting hit by the poison. With the burning slimes, I can just not go near them. And with the bats that shoot fire, I can do the same thing I do to avoid floating skulls. Like, there are games that are legitimately unfair, alright? But the attacks in this game can be avoided, and a lot of them have very clear telegraphs. Like the slimes definitely have arrows that show you where their projectiles are going to go so you can move out of the way in time. Well, I was curious what was down here, and I'm not curious anymore, and we're not going down there. Absolutely not. I don't want anything to do with that. Good to know. Right, so as long as we don't stand in one place on this purple stuff for too long, a tentacle will not impale us, and that's ideal. Avoiding tentacle impalement is ideal in CaveBlazers. I won't tell you what to do with tentacles in your day-to-day life, but in CaveBlazers, avoiding impalement with tentacles is preferable if you want to win. You know, I do not at all envy people that design games, because no matter how you design them, someone's going to get pissed at you. Because they're going to take your idea of challenge as some sort of offense to them. Or they're going to take your lack of challenge as some sort of offense to them. Or if your game isn't meant to be challenging, and it's like a walking simulator or an exploration-focused game, they're going to get upset at that too. Not that those games can't be bad, you know. It's just hard to imagine making a game where you actually make people happy. You know, the old saying goes, you can't please everyone, but, you know, a lot of the gaming community is just really toxic toward game developers and creators. It's kind of obnoxious. People asking for a lot of features and design changes without, like, taking into consideration that maybe it's designed that way because that's the developer's artistic vision, or maybe it's designed that way because it's for a demographic that isn't you, or maybe they can't implement those features because they don't know how, or it would take a lot of time and money they don't have. I mean, I pretty much tend to side with the creator in most situations. Obviously, there are situations where everyone can be wrong, and making a piece of fiction does not make you immune to criticism. Because I criticize plenty of things. Plenty of things. For example, a criticism about this game, when you're doing a daily run, which gives you certain alterations of the basic game mechanics, if you get the obstacle course alteration, which changes the level layout to be more like an obstacle course, it's possible to get unwinnable levels. Granted, only in daily run is this an issue, but, you know, still, getting unwinnable levels, even in daily run, is a problem. The daily run feature is just kind of like, they choose what weapons you start out with, you don't get any perks, and they add modifiers to the gameplay, kind of like the same modifiers you can use in custom mode, basically, which I've brought up before, so I'm not going to explain custom mode a second time. I'm getting real tired of stopping the recording every 2 minutes to tell the cats to shut up, because they're not comfortable with the new room layout. It's my room, cats, alright? I decide how it looks. Oh, I just remembered, something I didn't mention about custom mode is that you can enable experimental weaponry, which is just sort of overpowered or strange gimmick weaponry that wouldn't really fit with the normal design, but presumably the developer wanted to include anyway, so it's there in custom mode instead of the regular game mode. And I think that's kind of cool. Like, I'm sure a lot of people want it in the regular game mode. Spelunky certainly has strange weapons in its regular game mode, but, you know, the developer of this game had his idea of game balance, and I think that's fine. Alright, it's time for the third boss, and it has an obscene amount of health, so I'm gonna speed the boss fight up, so that way it doesn't take the solid 10 minutes it would have taken otherwise for you to watch. Oh. I used a teleportation rune to go back to the top, so that way I could search for additional money to use the healing shrine, because kinda low on health. That's what the teleportation rune does, though, is it takes you back to the top. And this is the first time I think I've ever used it for its intended purpose. And it was probably a good idea to come back up here, because we just got the Crimson Blade, which, when we kill an enemy with, gives us health back. So even if we cannot find enough money for the shrine, I'm trying to get this guy to take this potion and drink it. Because if he takes this potion and drinks it, then I can figure out what it does. But he doesn't seem interested. I'm not entirely sure what decides when the AI will and will not pick up stuff that you just left lying around. Maybe they're more likely to do it when they're your friend. But even so, sometimes they don't drink the potion, even when they pick it up, and sometimes they do. So, I don't know. But the orcs will drink potions when they pick them up. Unlike the other adventurers, the orcs will drink the potions. So, looks like I'm not getting that, that shrine. Yeah, he took the potion when he got friendly and didn't drink it, so I don't know what to do. I guess I'm just not using that potion. Alright, while passed, and I went looking around more, and I couldn't find enough money for the health shrine, and I drank a potion that caught me on fire, and made me poisoned, because I got desperate. So, let's see what this one... Okay, at least there's that. At least I got a shield. So, this next boss fight is the Moon Jelly monstrosity, or Medusa. I always call it Moon Jelly because I like that more. And this boss has the most health out of any boss, and it's this is the third boss fight, so that means it has even more health than it normally would. How this boss works is that it has two very basic attacks. It fires projectiles all around, and it brings down lightning, both very easy to avoid. And then it tries to swallow you, and you have to kind of trick it into smashing into the ground, and then hit it while it's glowing, and eventually it'll fall down if you hit it enough while it's glowing. But if you don't hit it enough times while it's glowing, then it just goes back to what it was doing before. So that's no good. It's not a particularly fun boss fight for me. It doesn't make itself vulnerable very often, and when it is vulnerable, you have to act extremely quickly, unlike the other bosses who have vulnerabilities for much longer period of time, and it takes so much time to take down. Hopefully this time we can actually hit it enough times. There we go. Right, so now that you understand how the boss works, I'm going to speed up this battle. It is worth mentioning that I picked up a blessing called the Hand Blessing, which allows you to be revived whenever you get taken down, with I think 20% of your health left. I'm not sure. Maybe it's 50%, but I think it's 20%. And that 50% is the Ankh, but maybe I have them reversed. Alright, that took a long time, but then again I've heard people saying they fought the late game bosses for upwards of 20 minutes, so it probably wasn't that bad when you take that into consideration, and it dropped some hearts for us to use. Unfortunately, things are only going to get more difficult from here, so I wouldn't bank on this going for too much longer. You might not bank on it going for too much longer either, given the fact that this is a linear piece of media and you can see how much longer the video has left. Building suspense is hard when you're on a platform like YouTube, where you can just kind of mouse over what you're looking at and see how much longer the video has going. Welcome to the Fungal Grotto, where all the enemies we've fought before are back, but there's more of them, and they're stronger, and there's more of them. Did I mention there's more of them? Because there being more of them is really important. It's very important to me that you understand that the volume of enemies is immense now. That's extremely necessary for you to understand. So as long as you've got that, I think we're good. Everything's also really fucking purple now. And right down here, you can see Hell. Hell itself. Look at all that. Look at all that shit. You got a new enemy type down there. You got two cave trolls, which are absolute bullet sponges. You got a bunch of spikes, a poison slime, another poison slime, a burn slime. This is just hell. But there is a way through hell. We just have to be very, very fucking careful. And also maybe if I have bombs, that wouldn't hurt. I do have a bomb. So that can't hurt. I made things a little simpler. Looks like the cave trolls can't jump up that ledge, so that's good. See, we made it through that hell and into another hell. And it looks like this hell may be my undoing. But we made it through one of the layers of hell. Who knows how many layers there were. But we made it through one layer. And I think that's something to be proud of.